Being that he doesn't want to pay the fine and that he doesn't want her to know that he never returned the book, he sneaks the book back on the shelf by kind of like pushing her over a little bit. Of course, there was a security camera, and him doing that ends up on the nightly news with the reporter calling him a piece of human garbage, which did get me, because apparently Chicago is such a small town that this would be a big deal to them. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Married with Children. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, we start with the Potent Notables, which are just a couple of interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the series or episode. Then I go into the episode overview, which is just me talking about the episode from beginning to end. And then I do the rank, the namesake of the show, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to figure out what is the best sitcom of all time. And today we're going to be ranking the first episode of the 3rd season of Married with Children, titled He Thought He Could. Written by Ron Levitt and Michael G. Moy and directed by Jerry Cohen. Now, this series has been out for like 40 years, so there will be spoilers. But let's find out how this episode ranked, starting with the Potent Notables.
Potent Notables.
So this episode aired Sunday, November 6, 1988. Now, will starting a new season help get Married with Children and Fox in general closer to competing with the other networks? Well, as it turns out, yes. Married with Children opened its 3rd season with a 9.4 rating in the 8:30 time slot. That's the highest we've seen for any Fox show so far. It actually beat 21 Jump Street and tied its lead-in America's Most Wanted for the best show of the night for Fox. As for competition, the juggernaut of Murder, She Wrote was still untouchable, getting a 21.4 rating. But it got closer to Day by Day on NBC, which had a 12.1, and closer still to Mission Impossible on ABC, which had an 11. 60 Minutes won the night with a 22.7 in the 7 to 8 p.m. time slot, just in case anyone was wondering. But that's kind of exciting. I'll be curious to see if they can keep these numbers up. So the next Potent Notable is about the kid who played Al when he was a kid, Eden Gross. Now, he previously played Carl, the kid who sat on Al's lap in Season 2's Christmas episode, You Better Watch Out. Now, for the last Potent Notable, let's talk a little about the woman who played DeGroot. Her name was Lou Leonard, and she made a living as a TV and film actress for a long time before this episode. The thing that made me truly interested in discussing her career is finding out that she was in a short called Husbands Beware. She played Dora, Larry's wife. Now that's Larry, as in Moe, Larry, and Shemp of the Three Stooges. Now Shemp is no Curly, but it's still pretty cool to say you've been in a short with them, in my opinion. I used to watch the Stooges with my dad, and it's very fond memories for me. Her birth name was Mary Lou Price, and she was born to a couple of vaudevillian parents who took her on the road with them as an infant. Her mom died when she was 13, and her dad ended up settling into Hollywood as a character actor in westerns. She worked in a bunch of guest appearance gigs in the 50s, but eventually made her way to New York and did Broadway for many years. She ended up doing a lot of touring while also doing a lot of guest spots. She made a full living as an actress, even though there were some years where she didn't get a ton of work. And the work she did get was often like this one, where the laughs came at her own expense, but she made the most of it. She had guest appearances on everything from Car 54, Where Are You? To Mork and Mindy, to Knight Rider. She ended up passing away in 2004 at the age of 77. So those are the Potent Notables. Let's go to the episode overview. First thing we notice moving into season 3 is that the opening credits montage has changed. We've got an older mulleted Bud, and everything looks just a little bit crisper. Like maybe Fox raised their budget? But after the cleaner, crisper opening credit sequence, we jump right into Peggy making Jiffy Pop, poorly of course. It's funny, but I get where Peg's coming from here. It's like, well, if I have to move it, what's the point? Okay, maybe I don't get where she's coming from here. Anyway, not only is she making it poorly, but it turns out it's got a Best Buy date of May 11th, 1972. And when Marcy points that out, Peggy says, it says Best Buy. It's not expired. I mean, starting with some goofy fun stuff here. Apparently she was making the popcorn for Steve and Al because they're cleaning out the Bundy's attic. As it turns out, all of this is just a lead up to the actual plot of the episode. You see, they bring down a box of Al stuff, which turns out to be a lot of Steve stuff, and one of the things in there is a library book of The Little Engine That Could. Now, I remember liking that book a lot when I was a kid, and more recently, my 7-year-old used to have me read that book over and over again when he was 1 and 2 years old, to the point where I would actually hide it sometimes. I'm not proud proud of it. But like, it's not that great of a book. Anyway, it turns out that the book is super overdue from the library, like 30 years overdue. Al decides to throw the book away and Steve and Marcy get on him about it, to the point that we get a flashback to when Al was a kid and had to deal with the librarian. Now, I think I would have empathized a little bit more with the librarian had they shown Al being a bad kid at all, but he was just a kid and she was being awful to him, telling him that he's going to be a failure and that she actually wishes failure upon him. I mean, geez, lady. Of course, cut to 30 years later and he never returned the book. Now, I will say they show Al as a kid being mercilessly mean to the librarian about her weight, but I mean, she started it. So that's the backstory behind not wanting to return the book. But Steve and Marcy end up convincing him to do it anyway, but when he does, he can't overcome his pride or the rather large late fee of $2,000. He does, of course, get in several barbs about her weight because, you gotta, apparently. Being that he doesn't want to pay the fine and that he doesn't want her to know that he never returned the book, he sneaks the book back on the shelf by kind of like pushing her over a little bit. Of course, there was a security camera and him doing that ends up on the nightly news with the reporter calling him a piece of human garbage, which did get me because apparently Chicago is such a small town that this would be a big deal to them. This turns out to be the most embarrassing thing that the Bundys have experienced, to the point that everyone is wearing bags over their heads to not be recognized when they're out in public. Even the dog has a bag on his head, which was a fun bit. But Al is determined to go pay the fee so that they don't have to live like this anymore. Once again, when he gets there, she's so intolerably cruel and mean to him that his pride won't let him pay the bill. So going back, in the scene when he was a kid, he says that he swears he's going to take her sugar bowl and pour it all into her gas tank. So at the end of this episode, as an adult man in his 40s, he grabs the sugar bowl when she's not looking and says he's going to keep a promise, though not the paying the fine promise. But that's it. That's the whole episode. Let's see how it ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh out loud. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, first category is story, and I gave story a 3.25. Okay, so the story is about returning a long overdue library book. That really doesn't sound like much, but it comes off well here. It's one of those things that I don't know works on any other show but this one. So let's go to acting, which I gave a 3.75. I don't think that Lou Leonard was bad. She was good even, but not great. Amanda Bierce's overacting when she shakes her head at Steve when he goes to grab for the popcorn is sort of emblematic of what I don't really like about her acting. It's not even that it's bad, it's just so hammy. But let's go to dialogue, which I gave a 3.75. It was funny as usual. I could have done without the incessant fat jokes. I mean, my goodness, there were a lot of them. I do wonder if the younger and thinner me would have found them funnier, but whatever.
I thought it was funny.
Either way, it could have been higher if they hadn't relied so much on the fat jokes. So let's go to episode coherence, which I gave a 4.5. This all really worked well. I think the world in which they show camera footage of a person putting a book back in the library to avoid the late fees on the news is a world I want to live in. Can you imagine that being the news instead of rape, pillage, and murder all the time? That sounds awesome.
What the hell are you doing? What are you a pirate?
All right, so let's go to character relatability, which I gave a 3.5. It was a pretty relatable episode. I understood Al's reluctance to return the book or pay the fine. First of all, the fine was egregious, but also that librarian was freaking awful. I get that Al's a schmuck, but he was still just a kid when she was saying that shit to him. Anyway, I think the whole embarrassment thing about the news footage was a little less relatable, but whatever. It was a fun episode. All right, so we had some pretty decent rankings. If it's got a decent laugh counter, then it's gonna be in the top 3 tiers. And it had 15, which is a pretty decent laugh counter. So this puts the episode total at a 33.75, which makes it an watch it again. For the series, the average is now at a 33.1, which keeps the series as an I'd watch it again. So thanks for listening and or watching. If you'd like to see a list of our episode and series rankings, you can do that on our website at therankpodcast.com. Now, for those of you who have been watching this series for a while and you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing and or following. Like the episode, comment. You can reach out to me at info@therankpodcast.com with suggestions, questions, whatever. I will respond to you. And if you want to help us monetarily, feel free to do so at our Patreon site at patreon.com/therankpodcast, where you can get access to all of our archived episodes. But I will leave you with this. So Al found an old book and Steve's stuff in the attic, but what did Bud apparently find in this episode? Puberty! Bud was sporting a mullet and a much deeper voice than what he had at the end of season 2. I just thought it was funny.
Okay, where's the joke?
I do wonder if the younger and thinner me would have enjoyed. Fuck.
Cut!
I do wonder if the younger and thinner me would have.
Cut!
I do wonder if the younger and thinner me would have found them funnier, but
I guess we'll never know.